the other platforms, but live on, oh, I should press record then too. Oh, you got to request record permission from the meeting host. Are they recording it? Do you know? I guess it'll be recorded on Facebook. I mean, the audio might not be that great. Okay, I think we're live.
I think we are.
Let's just see. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, there's a slight delay in the, just heads up for that. So I muted it so it doesn't screw me up. Oh, did it? No, you're still on. Okay, cool.
We're all good, and everyone gets to watch our intro before our intro.
All right. Well.
Okay, so reset.
Are we going to be able to see when people join? Is that part of this thing? It's my first time going Facebook Live, I think. So you've done a few of these, though. Did you like it all at Facebook Live at all, or no?
I think so. I try not to pay too much attention to who's coming on, and we'll stick with the plan here. So we're here on Monday night with Favorite Film Talks, part of the Westdale series. The Westdale has been hosting a number of these amazing events where people get to, I guess, join clubs or participate in these live music events or these live talks. And they've just done so many wonderful things since the movie theaters have shut down. And tonight and Monday nights is the Favorite Film Talk series, where they pick someone from the community to talk about one of their favorite movies. It's a great idea. And tonight it's I'm filling in for Fred Fuchs this evening, and the guest is Alicia Main, talking about her absolute favorite film, Almost Famous. Hi, Alicia.
Hello. Yes, I'm so excited to talk about this. I feel like I should be interviewing you about this, but it's a pleasure to be in your company again on a Monday night.
Yeah, no, it's you're probably the expert, because I know you say you've watched it so many times and you have all the versions of everything, and so I know you've probably seen it quite a bit. So it's I will humbly refer to you for all the great nuggets of material in this movie.
Absolutely. Well, as we were discussing before we went live, it's the 20-year anniversary of this film, which is just by chance. I didn't realize that before I picked this film, but it really takes me back because I was there in the theater as a 16-year-old watching this film. And so I was at the perfect age for a film like this to come out. I feel like it was custom made for me in so many ways. It just had such an impact on my life, all the elements of it. I said the music, the fashion, the story, just the story about how this young teenage journalist from Rolling Stone can be suddenly interviewing all these bands. And then just the amazing cast that came together and really brought the story to life. And it was a really, really unique experience for everybody on the set. And a fabulous director, Cameron Crowe, which I've seen all his films, so it's all around favorite. Do you have any? I can't remember when we did it in the film club. If you like, what was your first time watching it?
Oh, it was in the movie theater. Yeah, I definitely saw it. Definitely saw it in the theater when it came out, and then whenever the DVD came out, I bought the bootleg edition, which had the extra scenes, and it came with the CD, the recording of the band of Stillwater. It came with that, so I loved it. I just thought it was a fantastic movie, and I loved it. It just felt very authentic, right? So that's the thing with Cameron Crowe. It's almost, I guess it is his biography in many ways, right? As we'll get into, but it had a very authentic feel to it, which, those kind of movies stand the test of time, right? The ones that feel that they were genuine coming from whoever wrote it or created it. They just, there's a certain soft spot, I guess you can almost feel, on screen, and this certainly has a lot of them. So when you first saw it, and you said that had a big impact on your life, and here you are, you work at the radio station, you're a DJ, and you're also a band manager as well, and
in the past I used to do that.
Music supervisor. So you have a lot of these things that come out of that world. So when you were 16 watching this movie, was it a combination of the characters that you identified with, or was there one particular character that you're like, oh, that's me right there, and you wanted to follow? What was the real the character that you really identified with?
Yeah, it was, I would love to say, oh, I identified with Penny Lane, that was me, but I was not Penny Lane. I aspired to Penny Lane, but I probably mostly identified with William Miller, the main kid in the story, because I felt like his experience was similar to mine in a way, like just the dynamics between trying to convince your parents that you're not going astray because you're listening to the music that you're listening to, and just so inspiring for me to see an example of a teenage journalist and make that realization that that's something that I could pursue and do. And then of course there was just how fun it looked to be backstage, and it part of the party, part of the scene, hanging with the cool girls that were hanging there. I would have loved to have been best friends with them all. So it really had just so many things just hit for me with that, and I kind of did sort of become a combination of those things in my adult life, which is funny to look back on, being a bit of a journalist and also a band wife, and getting to have those sort of backstage on the road experiences. So I really from all angles, but the child parent dynamic, the relationship between the Frances McDormand character and William. I had very similar impassioned arguments with my parents about trying to convince them to let me go to music festivals, because they thought I was going to be there drinking and doing drugs and having sex and just being out of control. But when I was finally allowed to go to my first concert at 14, I didn't touch anything. I didn't want to be out of my mind. I wanted to be there watching and remember every single moment from it. And this was 14. So, a few years before Almost Famous came out, I was already really immersed in the live music. That was my favorite thing to go and do. So,
what was it? Yeah. What was the concert or the festival you saw?
My very first concert was a festival at, I think the venue was like Trudeau Park in Tweed. I can't remember. It was some kind of rock fest, but the big bands were the Tea Party and Treble Charger and Econoline Crush. So like all the kind of alternative rock favorites of the day. And I was front row, and at one point I got pushed through the barrier, because back then, mosh pits, everyone was crammed together, squished, and you had no place to put your foot if you brought your foot up. I don't know if it's still like that these days, but I got pushed through, this little 14-year-old, and so the security just let me stand in the kind of the security pit, and they just let me stay there, and that was like a taste of, oh, I'm kind of backstage.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. Where do we start? Well, we should talk about the fact that this film, when it came out, it actually debuted at TIFF, at the Toronto Film Festival. That's where it first premiered. But I learned that they actually didn't make money at the box office with it, which was kind of a surprise, considering how well it's done over the years. But they were up against The Exorcist, like a reissue of The Exorcist. Did you see that at the same time? Do you remember?
Nope.
No, that wouldn't have been up
no idea. Saw the original, but not
the remake. Was it a remake, or was it just a?
It must have been a remake, because the original is like in the 70s.
Yeah, I feel like either was a remake or a reissue of the 70s one with different, or maybe a remake. I don't know. I don't think I've seen it. But anyway, so they were up against that, which is kind of interesting to think, like, you can put all this effort and money into a film like that, and if it's up against, like, Star Wars happens to come out that weekend or whatever, you're not gonna make your money back on it, which is a sad reality, I suppose. So yeah. And what else can we say about?
So it opens at TIFF, and then it would have hit the theaters, I guess, that later that year, or that fall.
In 2000 or 2001, I guess. So it came out, I guess, late 2000. So you're probably seeing it around 2001. And it was really, so Cameron Crowe at this stage in his career this was his fourth film. He actually made the comparison of it being his fourth film to like a band's fourth album, and kind of the stage that they're at in their careers. He aligned that with his life, because he was very fortunate, because the third movie he made was Jerry Maguire, which was such a huge hit he suddenly was elevated to this place where he got permission to do things that a lot of movie makers don't get to do. So if he hadn't had that hit beforehand, Almost Famous wouldn't have got made. And it's says, like, from listening to the cast interviews and interviews with Cameron Crowe now, like that kind of movie wouldn't be made anymore, which is kind of sad to think of, I guess, for multiple reasons, budget cuts and whatnot. So yeah,
the music licensing alone these days.
Yeah, that's one of the most phenomenal things about the film. If you watch it, it's just back-to-back music. And the score by his wife at the time, Nancy Wilson, from Heart, is such a beautiful score. I absolutely love the score, and you do hear it, and it's the score is used very well, but you're almost feeling like you're just song after song after song. And it's probably Cameron Crowe, because this was his love letter to music. He wanted to have as many songs, probably from the area that meant something emotionally to him, represented in the film. So yeah, from a technical music licensing perspective, it would have been a lot of work for the music supervisor, who would probably be more acting in the role of clearing the music, so just doing all the paperwork, because I'm pretty sure Cameron Crowe had a strong idea of those songs he wanted to use, and because of his relationship over the years with all these bands, would have had access to actually getting permission to use a lot of stuff. Like a lot of bands that are really you don't hear on a lot of soundtracks, because they very rarely give permission for their music to be used. People like Neil Young, Led Zeppelin, and they're used multiple songs in the film. So that's pretty impressive for someone like music supervisor like me that just can appreciate how hard that is.
Yeah, and the use of the music too, which some people may not know, is that like there's different prices for different uses. So if the music is something that the characters within the scene can hear, that's a different kind of license, or it's labeled differently than if it was just background and no characters are hearing it, or if it's playing over the end credits or something. There's different, because the music in the movie is used, like the characters hear the music that we're hearing, like a lot in the movie.
Yeah. The most expensive scenario in a licensing scenario is when the characters are actually engaging with the song in the scene. So obviously this movie has a very big scene of that, which is the bus scene with the Elton John song Tiny Dancer, which is such an iconic and memorable scene. Because all the cast are singing along to it. It makes the license a different type of license that they have to apply for. It's like a visual vocal. They're singing along to the master recording of that song. So not to say it was the most expensive song in the film, but it would have been, like, in typical licensing terms, that would be command more dollars normally, because of how much that song is adding to the story and the narrative in that moment, that it can have an argument that it's, those art forms are really blending in that moment, music and film. And in this movie is an example of those two are so intertwined that obviously it goes without saying you can't have one without the other in this instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that whenever I watch a movie, they always get to there's a buddy scene in the movie, and they put the song on the radio and everyone starts singing. And in my head, when I'm watching them, I'm like, okay, here's the famous song they want to throw in there to sing. But nothing in this movie felt forced. Like everything that was there if it was real. It didn't feel like it was put there, oh, let's just have this song for this reason. Like everything was there for a legitimate reason. Like even when the daughter was leaving to go to be an airline stewardess, and she says, this song is the reason why I'm going, and she plays the song for her mom, and rather than speaking to her mom, she uses a song to kind of tell her. So the use of music was great, but it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like they're just dropping a song here and there. And
oh yeah, absolutely. That was such a great scene. And I urge anyone that hasn't seen the director's cut to get it, because there's so many great scenes that they had to cut. They shot, I think Cameron Crowe references that the advice he got from Steven Spielberg, just like, shoot everything, or shoot every word, or whatever the quote is. But he shot a lot of stuff, and so some of the ideas he had were cut from the film, and one of them was an 8-minute scene where they're listening to Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, which is what William was kind of taking a note out of his sister's playbook there, and was trying that on his mom to get her to listen to the whole poetry of Stairway to Heaven and try to say that this is an art, that, you know, these aren't just drug addicted, you know, low lives, like they actually are, you know, real poetic and adding a voice. And so of course it was long, and they probably couldn't get the rights to use the entirety of Stairway to Heaven, so it got cut, but it is in the director's cut, like a deleted scene on that, which Nathan has on his shelf. Yes, that's the one you want. Oh,
so if viewers get a chance, get this one, the bootleg cut. So you're going to get your must have it on my desk. So you get the CD of the band with like 6 or 7 tracks, and this is the bootleg cut with all the deleted scenes. I have the other one in my computer right now, so that's not there. But you can actually, they actually have the scene where Stairway to Heaven was to be placed. So they tell you at what point, you know, when the needle hits on screen, then you put you press play, I guess, on Stairway to Heaven. You could watch the full scene, what it would have been like if Stairway to Heaven had been in that scene and in the movie. It's great. It's fantastic. I mean, I'm sure it exists on YouTube or something. I'm sure that scene has been put together somewhere, but it's highly recommended to see it because it adds a lot. It really does. And to the mother's arc as well, right? Because the mother is learning, you know, about her kids as she's going on as well. So it's a journey for her as well. Yeah. Because the way she starts off, you know, lying to her son about how old he is and not wanting her daughter to, you know, listen to these records, and so it's kind of there's an arc for her as well. Yeah. And it is quite autobiographical as well, which, as he, you know, admits, like in terms of the inspiration of the character, and they really wanted to have that authentic, his mom's kind of essence authentically presented in the film, probably as like a bit of a, you know, gift to her as well. But I really, Frances McDormand was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Like, well, you think of it, two of the actors in this film were nominated for, you know, in the same category. That's how good, you know, obviously the performances were viewed. Unfortunately, neither of them won. Kate Hudson, obviously, for Penny Lane. But he really lucked out with a phenomenal cast. Like how it came together, and there's a big background you can dig up online about all the people he went through to cast. One of the most significant would be Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe, I think, was one of the ones they were considering. That's why I'm thinking of it. Russell Hammond's character, which Billy Crudup played. Brad Pitt was signed on for a good few months in the pre-production. Like, I think he spent like about 4 months working on the film before he backed out for whatever reasons. Which is funny because he was my first actor crush. So if he was in that film, I don't know, my brain would have probably exploded. But it worked out so well the way it was with really an unknown lead, like the William Miller, Patrick Fugit, that, which is probably pretty rare these days to take a chance on, like, for that big of a film. I think it was like 5 months of shooting, a crazy long shoot, and to have somebody that isn't like, you know, inexperienced, kind of unknown, is probably never happens anymore. would you say? Yeah. And I want to add one thing just for people that are listening. We're here on Zoom, but it's going out to Twitter and to Facebook and to YouTube. So if you have any questions or kind of comments want to add to it, please do that, and we'll kind of have a look through our Facebook and YouTube and Twitter feeds to see any questions or kind of comments you have. If you want to make any notes about some things that maybe we've missed or that you'd like us to kind of talk about. Yes. So it's it's The Westdale on Facebook or The Westdale on YouTube and on Twitter. Yes, sweet.
One of the other things that's kind of interesting to note, and it really helps, I think, with the story, is it was filmed chronologically. So that would have a really great effect of having those characters actually bond together over that time. But also sort of by the end of it, where like William Miller and Penny, they're just, everyone's just exhausted looking, and that's kind of plays into the storyline. And it's because they're legitimately dying of exhaustion. Like,
wow, I didn't know
yeah.
that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and then that's not very commonly done, I would imagine, right? Like
No.
to shoot chronologically. There's no need to do that necessarily. But it also was another interesting thing I learned about it was that Patrick Fugit, he grew like 3 or 4 inches in the course of the filming. He had a growth spurt because he was like 16 years old or whatever, right? So they had to play around with the camera angles and stuff so that he didn't suddenly look like a giant next to Russell or anyone. So,
Oh, wow.
That's kind of a funny when you're filming with people at that age, like that are kind of going through puberty or like, you know, having growth spurts all of a sudden, that like it really would impact your film to like have to, you know, try to keep it making sense for continuity. But did you, I think you shared the link with me, but did you get into that podcast series that just came out on it, the Origins podcast?
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah, I just like binge listened to it all over the weekend. So that's
Oh,
why
good,
it
good.
sounds like I'm just full of these facts like spewing out of my brain because I loved it. I loved being like immersed back into that world of it. But yeah, I can share a link on my social media, but it's all of the key cast members and Cameron Crowe and the casting director. I want to say her name's Gail Stevens. Does that sound right to you, Nathan?
I don't know.
She's a big casting agent. She's done a lot, but she's on there. And yeah, like, so you're just getting Nancy Wilson, Peter Frampton, who is another of the musical advisors who helped teach the band how to play guitar and just kind of technical advisor on some of that stuff. And he has a kind of small part in the movie as Humble Pie's road manager, which is sort of funny, since yeah, it's like must have been a pretty surreal experience for him for that. Yeah, so that's worth listening to again if you're a fan of this movie.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I saw it come up in a feed somewhere and I thought I had to send it to you because I knew you would be all over it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, a lot of people sent it my way when they saw it right away. Like, oh, Alicia, I love this. It's all like just recorded in like recently, so it's everybody's perspective looking back on the 20 years. And everyone speaks just so highly, fondly of the time and wanting to wishing they could just get back on the bus, because it just looked like such a beautiful, fun world, and it was so tastefully done without the typical cliches of a rock and roll kind of movie. Just and tastefully and just like the way that the female characters were represented, I thought were really like they all, there was time given to the female characters and their backstories, and they weren't just kind of props or just to look hot next to the band. Like he could tell that Cameron Crowe was really just coming from a really just love of the people in his life and the women that meant a lot to him, and he wanted to portray them like, not in a, like there's no like nudity for the sake of having boobs on the screen or anything like that. Like it's all like just done in a way that you can, like, a 12-year-old could watch it and it's appropriate, and it's like probably a good time for an adolescent to kind of explore some of those topics, and you can show it like it's probably rated like PG or something like that. Like there's nothing too extreme in it, so it just makes it more accessible, I guess, which probably helps it, the reason why it's become like stayed such an iconic film. What about you? Like, was there anything from like Cameron Crowe's style or that movie in particular that sort of impacted you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, like just the realism of it, right? Just writing from an honest place of something that about, something that you're interested in, and paying tribute to something that time that you loved. Like if I had to write a movie of something that I absolutely loved, maybe of something that I haven't seen yet, it would probably be something in the 80s. Like I was born in the 70s, but grew up in the 80s, and I haven't seen my 80s movie yet. I haven't seen the movie that makes me feel like I was in that time. I see kind of faux versions of 80s, but I haven't seen like the real what it felt like for me. So that's probably what I would do. And watching Almost Famous, it seems like he made the movie that made him feel like he did when he was living in that time. So it's really and the music is great, like being a musician and everything just so so real, and you felt like you were on that bus when you're watching the movie. You felt like you were on tour with them. You really go on that journey with everybody, right? No matter which character you latch onto, you feel like you're part of that journey, like you've been dropped into that world for a little bit, like you're kind of a fly on the wall seeing everything that's kind of happening. So it's because the movie, it doesn't shift point of view too much, I guess. It's really from the point of view
from Williams'
yeah
point of view, which was, again, when we're mentioning just like a very inexperienced actor, that this is definitely the biggest thing by far. I think he said that before this, he'd done like 2-day shoots and that's it. He'd never done like months on a film. So you can imagine like the confidence the director has to have that he can handle that, first of all. But yeah, it was just like really challenge, it was just like an unbelievable kind of thing for him, a world for him to be thrown into. So
let's talk about your hat.
Yes, it's from California, so it's an authentic Penny Lane. I think the clothes in that film were so inspirational to me. I went out and got like I have like a tapestry coat like Penny Lane wears. I've got like the embroidered boots, like I was so inspired by the fashion of that film. Like the costumes are just so beautiful. Like that would have been my dream wardrobe room to be in. And it's really made me interested. And I want to find, we'll talk about it after, if anyone's out there listening, anyone that has a connection to like costume design or just working in wardrobe in a film that has a Hamilton connection, I'd love to talk to you for my podcast, because I really have so many questions about what that's like, kind of drawing together a wardrobe and how you approach something like that. And that's so interesting to me. Just a little bit off topic, but I'll share it because I was on
no, not off topic at all. Like this movie inspired you. This movie inspired on so many levels that you went out and bought fashion because you were so inspired by the look of that movie. So of course, and now you're inspired to go and talk to someone who does costuming for movies, right? So it totally ties in, and it just goes to show the impact this movie's had on you.
Oh, I know completely. I think the part of the reason I wanted to watch it so many times was just to stay immersed in that world. I was trying to think, I'm like, is it the one I've seen the most times? And I would say it has. The only contender might be The Last Waltz, if you count that as a film. It's concert films are not a little bit different, but probably just like just a normal Hollywood film. I think Almost Famous for sure. I wanted to be just stay in that world. It's just like such a feel good movie, which is you don't come around to all the time these days. Harder to dig through to find. But when I actually started to go backstage at shows, I was so disappointed.
I was going to ask you that what you saw in film and then what you actually saw. So tell us what was the. So we know Almost Famous. We see what it's like backstage. We see what it's like when they're on stage and everything's happening. And then so now you're backstage, and what do you see and how do you feel about it?
Yeah. Well, so when they're playing these big, in Canada, like playing arenas or something like that. So the backstage area is just hockey dressing rooms with fluorescent lighting, and it stinks like hockey equipment. Like it's just, there's nothing very like glamorous about it, or even like smaller clubs kind of backstage. Like just was, I found it just like industry people standing around schmoozing, which I wasn't kind of an industry person, so I count myself in that. To the start, I was more like a fan that was like, well, I'm working for an artist manager, so I'm kind of like a personal assistant, but I can talk my way. I know somebody at Warner, I know somebody at Universal, so if a concert comes to town, I'm getting backstage passes. But like for example, I got a backstage pass to see like a Guns N' Roses show, and this was not good era Guns N' Roses. This is like, one of their horrible comebacks with Axl Rose. And I just I didn't even want to go backstage because I knew how lame it would be, whereas maybe in the 80s, maybe it would have been fun to be backstage at a Guns N' Roses show, but I don't know. I think the world's cleaned up a lot. There's a lot more, people are more risk averse. There's a lot more money in it. There's, they don't want to have a 16-year-old backstage. Like, why would they want to have the liability of a 16-year-old girl backstage? Or if they do, they don't want to have an environment there where there's going to be, drugs or danger, or anything like that. So I think it's just changed with the times. It's just not a party. The probably funnest backstage experience I had, I think it might have even been in Hamilton at the arena here. But it was Dierks Bentley, so country star, but he travels with a big stage production, but he converted one of the hockey dressing rooms into an actual bar with he traveled with all the setup, like big neon sign called Whiskey Row, and you can go and it's like a nice bar atmosphere, everyone's having cocktails and stuff, and like no one makes the effort to kind of make that. And I feel like it just, everyone, like they just did, and they did, his band did like one of those hugs, like in Stillwater, where they're like arms around each other and they sang a little thing or did a little prayer or something. And I had never seen that happen, I think, until I was at that concert. I'm like, oh, it's a little bit like Almost Famous, So anyways, but yeah, no, mostly backstage now is just people on their phones, just like everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. It's disappointing.
So
I wish it was different.
30 years from now, when someone goes to make their 2020 film about backstage concert, it's going to be a boring movie about just sitting on phones and updating their social media profiles and.
Yeah, I don't know. And well, probably social media has had an impact of it too, like, because I know that the backstage environments that I've been in are very controlled by the security, the tour management, of anyone coming in. If anyone is coming in as a friend of somebody, they're going to have their phone on them. They're going to be able to record anything that they see. And sometimes like people are arguing, band members are arguing, or like a manager's shouting at someone, or like, there's something that they don't want to get out in public maybe. And so I think that's really, made things tighter backstage too, because anyone could, be snapping something and it can instantly be out on social media. So everyone has to be a lot more careful these days. So
so I guess, even in watching the movie, that you really are getting a slice of that life at that time, right? An accurate picture of what it would have been like to be there. So it is, autobiographical, but it's documenting something that happened that way and felt that way. And so it is interesting that in the movie that you can kind of go watch that and almost feel like you're living that experience. Much like you felt like this is a real experience that I want, kind of thing. And then you get to that experience, and it's not quite the way that you had hoped that you saw on screen, but knowing that at some time it was like that is kind of makes it for a great watch for anyone that's listening now that hasn't seen the movie. This, really take a chance on it and put it on, because you'll feel the time. And so going back to your hat, when I brought that up, is like the fashion in this movie. Obviously, the authenticity of everything, the music, it carried right over into the fashion. Like you could almost feel the fabric when you're watching the movie. Like just the texture of everything, and the fur and the leather and the.
Yeah, I meant to look up the name of who was doing the costumes on this one. I can probably IMDb it instantly, but the other element of that, and again, I didn't make notes of anyone's names. I'm just remembering from my head, but I think the cinematographer was John Toll.
It was John Toll. Yeah.
John Toll. Okay. So his background is like documentary and photography, and so he would be shooting backstage, like and documenting things in the music scene at that time. I think it was really important for Cameron Crowe to have that someone that has that elements, because that's how they approach the lens, and just kind of that's so important too, when you have everything else looking great, the detail of like the sets and the costumes and the characters' hair and makeup, everything, and then just having it shot correctly too, right? And so they tried to mimic some of those angles from the photographs of like a band walking towards their jet for the first time, like, okay, it's big time now, they're going on the No More Bus, right? They're going on the private planes. And so just watching that, seeing how that was all shot, it's just so, you don't even, because it's so well done, you don't think about it, but if you try to notice some of it, how it's done, and how it kind of mimics some of that rock and roll photography. It's quite interesting too.
Yeah, and we talk about this too in the film clubs, is that how everything you see in these great movies, everything is well thought out. Like they have this idea going in mind of the way they want to capture things and how they do it, and yeah, so you get a cinematographer that's really familiar in that way of shooting, and then you get that authentic feel to it all, right down to the fashion. So I pulled up the fashion. Betsy Hyman, Almost Famous, Pulp Fiction, Vanilla Sky. So pretty big movies there. And I don't know if she was nominated for anything in.
Oh geez, I would hope she was for this movie. My goodness. But oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because Pulp Fiction as well has like some pretty iconic outfit moments, like, fashion influential. So yeah, that's great.
Just nominations here.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be coming from Almost Famous, except one was for Pulp Fiction, a nominee.
Yeah, great. Well deserved.
Yeah.
Oh man. Should we talk about some of the specific scenes? Like, I feel like maybe are we getting too technical?
Yeah, no, whatever.
We're like talking about all the elements, but some of the scenes.
My eyes kind of darting back and forth to the screens, just checking to see if anyone has.
Who's out there?
Yeah, anybody out there with some?
I saw the Westdale posted the link to the podcast that we were talking about, so that's great. So
and then you are looking for someone in the Hamilton community.
Yeah, I would love to.
That is part of that deals with costume design. So I know there's a lot of filmmakers, film lovers that watch these things. So if anyone knows of someone that works in the fashion for film specifically, Alicia has a great podcast called Hamilton Film, interviewing a different person in the community.
Maybe I don't know if anyone local was on Mrs. America, which is they shot some of it in Hamilton last summer, which is a FX series starring Cate Blanchett, but it's set in the early 70s. So I did background on that film, and I got to go to the wardrobe room. It was my first time. I think it was my first time ever doing background. I've never been on a set before, which no one could believe when I was there, because everyone is like goes all the time to the background stuff.
Yeah.
It was random that I went, but so I didn't really know what to expect. I'm like, okay, they're going to send you to wardrobe and a fitting first, and then you should go to the following day or whatever to shoot. And I go into this room, and it was just this huge like warehouse full of clothes from the 70s. And I was just so excited. Like, you're not allowed to take pictures of anything, because it's all pretty, but I did sneak a few of just in the dressing room of the outfits they were getting me to try on. I was like, this is amazing. It's so cool. So but any kind of costume I'm interested in, really, just like how the process of how you go about, designing that, which is so, it's like, I think every element on its own, people don't really notice about film unless you pick it out and look at it, because everything, if it's done well, it all comes together so seamlessly that you only notice it if it doesn't look right, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So so anyone in that world, that's so fun.
So the music, the fashion, and the cast, and the story, these are all like major elements, and they just hit it out of the park on every single one of them. So you want to talk about casting now, if we want to get into, because you mentioned some of the characters that you heard had been up for the role, Brad Pitt, maybe Russell. And
I know a bit. So the other main one was the Penny Lane character, was huge and very coveted role at the time. There's a bit of Kate Hudson talking on that podcast, and she talks about how much she wanted the role. She was initially cast as Anita, the sister. Which would it's really bizarre to think about, because Zooey Deschanel was such a perfect fit for that role, in all the ways. So Kate said at the time, then, and there was, because I was a teenager, I remember it was just like just such a flood of movies, teen movies, right? Like there was, I think, like the American Pie series come out, the Virgin Suicides, which I talked about in the film club, 10 Things I Hate About You, some like really big. It was like just everyone, there was a lot of roles at the time for teenage girls, I guess. But there was like something so unique about that Penny Lane role. Like it was so much more layered and stuff than some of the other sort of typical girlfriend roles, or that would have been going at the time. If you watch some of the movies from that time, you'll immediately see what I mean. But she so she was just desperate to get it, but she was cast as a sister. And then actually Canadian, very well-known Canadian actress Sarah Polley was set to play Penny.
Oh wow.
Cameron says that she kind of backed out because he thought maybe she was worried about her indie cred being affected by being in a big Hollywood movie. And he was trying to say, this is not going to be that. Like, it's not going to ruin, that she wanted to maybe take a different path, a different direction in her career. So that's when they were kind of struggling. I think Natalie Portman was kind of one of the ones that was considered as well.
Wow.
But Kate just begged to read for it. And then when she did, she got the part, and then they're like, oh, well, now we need a new sister character. So that's Zooey Deschanel got pretty lucky with that. And she's talking about her experience too on the podcast for that. I think Frances McDormand was kind of the first choice for that, first pick, and that worked out. I don't think they really saw a lot of people for that. I think maybe someone mentioned like maybe Meryl Streep, or like just the normal who's of that age group kind of at the time probably would have been looking at, but I think Frances was kind of like a shoo-in for sure. They had seen her, and maybe I don't know, maybe it was they had just seen her in Fargo, and like or something about her in that, like they thought that she would be perfect for that.
She was just incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And some of the other, like the Jason Lee, I don't know if there was anyone really else like who was up for that role, but they found him from the Kevin Smith kind of franchise. I think maybe they just seen him in Chasing Amy or something like that, and so really wanted him to read for it. He hadn't acted a lot at that point. I didn't know this about him, but apparently he was like a skateboarder, and that was sort of he was kind of professional skateboarding at the time in California, but kind of got lured into the film world a little bit. So yeah, that's interesting. Oh, and then another one we should talk about too, which is so great, is the Jimmy Fallon, because he was again a little bit of like he wasn't that popular at the time. He was a little bit of an unknown entity who I think Cameron just like really loved his his impressions. That was what he was best known for probably when he was cast. And but yeah, there's some really funny Jimmy Fallon moments on that podcast. So they're talking about just him just being a goof on set, and just like adding a little bit of that comedic element all the time, sometimes to the point where I think he got in trouble a lot in SNL for breaking character and laughing during skits and stuff. Apparently he did that like a lot during the shoot too. Like he just couldn't keep it together, he was laughing. And so some of the things he said they had to shoot just him by himself so that he wasn't going to be like laughing in the scene. Like, oh man, he sounds like quite an interesting dude, and just really funny in that manager role. Like I think he played it really well. I think his performance had some mixed reviews from our film club when we talked about this movie, but I thought he was great.
And I think that's because in the film club, there's some people that were probably know Jimmy Fallon more of what he's like now. So to see him in that role, it kind of takes you out of the movie for a moment, right? Because you're now thinking about this late night talk show host, SNL star kind of thing. And
you're probably right. You probably had to, like know a little bit what he was like 20 years ago, instead of if you're 20 years old now, you have a different impression of the Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, that's for sure.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, he was.
Sorry, what did you say?
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh yeah.
Lester
Bennings. Like again, I haven't been not talking about him because he was one of the ones of, unfortunately, not on the podcast, but and because he wasn't, because unfortunately he's passed, and so everyone was talking about him, but I think people were talking more openly about him because they could just, everyone knows how it ends with him. So I think they were more willing to really just talk about sort of like his real personality and character, and just things that kind of make him sound like he might be a little bit difficult to work with, but nobody would describe him as difficult. Everyone just like was really respected him and his method and stuff. But he was, yeah, he seemed like a pretty phenomenal person to work with. He first he wouldn't read for the role, which is funny. Like he refused to. So Cameron was kind of like, but I think it was Gail, the casting agent. It was like, no, he's going to be, yeah, he's going to be great, But Cameron's like, yeah, but he won't read for me. And he's like, you just have to trust. And I think they just had like a meeting, and so he kind of was like, okay, yeah, he's the one. Which is a big role. Lester Bangs was such a big part of Cameron's story, because that was the person that was his first kind of mentor into rock journalism. And so you can imagine, like, he really wanted to get the right person to play him. And I don't know who else, I can't remember who else they considered for that. I think they did read a lot of people for that role, though, because he really just wanted to be sure that's going to be the one. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was fantastic. That's probably the after the movie was done, that was the role that I probably remembered the most. I remembered the most lines for some reason was Philip Seymour Hoffman, just the way that he played him and the way he delivered his lines, and some of the lines that he had I thought were fantastic. But yeah, he was fantastic. And Billy Crudup too. We mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, he was, I mean, that was, obviously, again, such a big role. And for as much of a Brad Pitt fan I am, I would have a hard time, like, even as he's a fantastic actor, I'm sure he could have pulled it off and made it believable. But, I think, yeah, Billy Crudup was just so perfect in so many ways for that. Just, because in 2000, like, Brad Pitt was like one of the biggest, like, was it like just off the Fight Club or something like that? But he had been off like blockbuster after blockbuster, like, are like these really like big Hollywood films. So and I can't remember what I would have seen Billy Crudup in at the time, but nothing to that, probably to that level. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so I think just having somebody that's not that you hadn't seen in a lot of really big roles just really helped to just say, really make you think like that he is that guy, like that is Russell. And I think it's still his most well-known role, like where people, if they saw him on the street, that would be like the first one. Oh, you were the one in Almost Famous, kind of thing, right?
I'm just gonna
like, is he not like, I feel like I've seen, like, does he do like kind of maybe theater as well? Is that why maybe he's not really?
Great question. Let's talk Billy for
Google all this
15
stuff.
minutes here. We got.
Well, no, we should start giving away prizes in the comments. So, anyone tell me what Billy Crudup's doing these days?
Almost Famous. So before that,
yeah,
Waking the Dead, Jesus' Son, The High-Low Country.
Okay. Yeah.
I had seen him. Okay, there's a movie from '98 called Without Limits.
Okay.
And this was the Steve Prefontaine story, the runner, the long distance.
Okay, right.
And that was a fantastic movie. I really liked that. That's where I first saw him.
Okay.
And that was it wasn't indie, but I think it was Tom Cruise had produced that movie.
Okay.
Robert Towne. It was a smaller movie, but he was fantastic in it. So that was the first time I saw Billy Crudup on screen, was 2 years before Almost Famous.
Right.
But yeah. It's, and then after Almost Famous, 6 years later, he was in Mission Impossible 3. So that's a pretty big movie.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one either, so he'll always be Russell Hammond to me.
Yeah. Public Enemies, the Michael Mann movie, was in that. That's what it was.
One of the other anecdotes, which I think Cameron talks about in the director's cut, was one of the most pivotal scenes in the film is when Penny overdoses on the Quaaludes and at the Plaza Hotel. And Williams has to be the one to revive her. And he has this little kind of, romanticizes it. And in song, in his head, he's hearing Stevie Wonder, My Sharia Moore, and he's just, and he looks he has this just perfect look in his eyes of just like this, love and like kind of heartache. And, but I don't know, it's hard to describe. Well, apparently Cameron Crowe was having a really hard time getting the right emotion out of him because he was exhausted. They had just flown in, I think, from LA the day before. Everyone's jet lagged, working like probably a 14-hour day. And so he kind of played on his emotions and saying, we're wrapping in a couple days and you're never going to see anyone again. Like, these aren't really your friends. Like, this is how the business works. You see people and then you never see them again, and kind of just like making him feel like, oh, like just to, kind of like messing with him a little bit to make him feel more emotional to get that scene. And then it worked. And then he had to apologize after. He said it was like one of his director tips and tricks, I think he learned from, maybe the Billy Wilder's school, because I think that was the only thing he talked about being kind of trained in something to do with a Billy Wilder instructed, I don't know if it was a course or some kind of thing that he did, but I know like Billy Wilder was a huge like influence on him, and that scene actually was an homage to a scene in The Apartment. You've seen that film with like Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. It's from the early 60s, but it has a very similar scene where she overdoses in the man's room. He has to try to revive her, and so that's kind of the inspiration for that scene. And when he mentioned that, I think in the director's cut, I immediately had to go watch The Apartment. So kind of it was a film that it made me want to explore, oh well, Cameron Crowe was influenced by these films, I want to go see these films. So
yeah, that's
had that. Yeah, like he mentions like Truffaut, and so I just wanted to delve into what inspired him. And so that was another like thing that was why I love this movie so much. It just had an influence in a lot of ways of what I wanted to get interested in. I'm sure there would have been music on that I hadn't heard at that time as well, even though like classic rock was kind of my jam when I was 16. But I grew up in the country, and remember, children, this is the time before iTunes and Napster was like, I think a couple of years away, and it took you about 8 hours to download an MP3. So I didn't have access to a lot of, I couldn't just hear these. I couldn't just hear like a Simon and Garfunkel song unless it was on the radio, or so a lot of stuff. I'm sure I immediately bought that soundtrack, of course. I don't know if it's on vinyl. I would be surprised, because I think it would be too expensive for them to do.
I was going to ask you actually talking about seeing the movie when it first came out and being so influenced by it. At that point, had you been into vinyl, or did you discover vinyl later on? So you grew up in the country. Did you have a stack of vinyls that you would listen to? What was your cassette? What was your
well, my personal format was CDs, because they were the new fun thing when I was a teenager. But I grew up with records in the house, with vinyl records. My parents had their record collection, and the turntable was still set up, and the records were there accessible to me. So that's why I'm saying, that's why classic rock was probably the most music I had, because they had all the David Bowie and Rolling Stones and Beatles and Led Zeppelin and all the normal stuff. Growing up in the 70s, they were teenagers in the 70s, so they would have been listening to all that stuff. And so I was exposed to a ton of that, which obviously shaped me and then drew me to a film like Almost Famous, because so much of that was already familiar to me. But just this, and I put it on, I think, on my Facebook and Twitter. I posted this little gif of the actress Firuza Balk, who's also fantastic in her role as one of the Band-Aids. But she has this quote, and I feel like I still get like a little feeling in my chest when I think about that scene where she just says, look at these new girls. They don't know what it's like to like truly love a piece of music like so much that it hurts. And that's how music felt to me at 16. Like, I could listen to a song and it would hurt. Like, you ache for it. Like, it's just, it was incredible, like, feeling. And so that movie really so captured that for me, like, so got it. Like, you could just tell that it was created by a music fan, like, that really got it. You felt like you were part of that world, like you were part of that club in a way, because you got it, like you were in on it, the joke, like you're in on it, like exactly what they mean when that music had that feeling, like being at the side of the stage. And like Williams, like, he's a journalist, he's like taking notes, and Penny like pushes them, like, can't put that away, just like watch it, like, and, let it like absorb it, don't be distracted in this moment. And so it's beautiful. I love it. Like I said, I could just talk about it all night. But it's such a pleasure, and I really hope that the Westdale, I think, moving. I think everything's kind of getting closer, hopefully, to opening again if we get into stage 3. But I really hope that they will put Almost Famous on and we can all watch it together in the theater, because like I would love that opportunity. I haven't seen it in theater since I was 16, so I'll probably just be in the center, just like bawling my eyes out, and like it'll be great. So yeah, I really hope let's all if they start doing any kind of votes on what movies should we get, because it's a great time because there's not a lot of content coming out of Hollywood right now with everything on the back, so it's a good time to try to go and license some old favorites. So just keep that in mind, people. If you're wanting to come to the Westdale, like maybe just send an email and just, hey, have you thought about getting this one in? Because I think like they take that into consideration.
Oh, for sure. That's a great idea. And so you're gonna be the host of it. So we want the Westdale to show Almost Famous, and you're gonna host the evening, and it's going to be a costume party where everyone can dress.
I would love that.
Best.
Imagine like just showing up in the theater and we're all dressed like that. Oh, it would just be such a heartwarming experience right now, like within this age where we cannot connect. We can connect through music. It's like if you ever get lonely, you just go to your record player and visit your friends. So
there you have it. So people write into the Westdale and say you want this, and we'll have a costume Almost Famous party, and maybe we'll have a little band playing before the.
We got to.
Yeah, we'll get it set up. We know some people here at the Westdale, so we'll see if we can
help make it happen, Nathan. Yeah,
help make it happen. So this has been great. This has been really, really fun. It's nice to not just revisit a movie, but to revisit it with someone who's so passionate about it, a movie that moves somebody in some way and has a kind of a deeper meaning, and it clearly has affected you, and you could tell. And I'm sure we could talk for another 2 hours on it if we go through each scene by scene. There's just so much. So it's been great. Thank you for doing this favorite films talk. And next week we have a movie called Black Cop from Hamilton-born filmmaker Warren P. Sonoda. So nice. Warren is a fantastic director of film and television. His movie that just shot in Hamilton, called The Things I Do for Money, will be playing at the Starlight Drive-In.
I just saw that today. That's amazing.
At the Starlight Drive-In. So that is pretty fantastic. So you're going to be able to talk to Warren on Monday when he's here doing his talk about the movie Black Cop. And
that's awesome. I want to join in. I haven't seen that film, so it'd be good.
There you go. So you'll find out why that movie means so much to Warren, the same way Almost Famous means so much to Alicia. So thank you everybody for participating, and thanks Alicia, and thanks to the Westdale Theater. We're getting close, so hopefully soon we'll see you all in those cushy seats in the beautiful Westdale Theater. And until then, we'll just enjoy all these things online.
All right, bye.
All right, have an awesome night. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.